Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for PCCS's emPower Hour. Thanks for joining us on your lunch break. Today, I have a really exciting guest. We have, as always, Mr. Kevin Roman. And we also have with us today Christina Silva-Soto, who is the Outreach and Intake Specialist at Tri-County Care, as well as a mom of a beautiful son, Oliver. So thank you, Christina, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
We are so happy to have you here. We're happy to have you on so many different ends, as on care coordination side, parent side, self-direction side. I mean, honestly, what don't you do?
Not much. No. There's a lot I don't do, and I still strive to learn every single day. But yeah, I'm just like any other parent, just trying to get through. So
yeah. So tell us, explain to us, what is a typical day for you, or what are things that we need to know how we got here?
Well, for me, I didn't even know what OPWDD waiver was, what these services were. And when you get a diagnosis, it's the scariest day of your life, right? Because now you know something's going on, but you really don't know how to handle it. Had my developmental pediatrician not mentioned this to me, and she wasn't even really clear about what this was, I would have no idea. Mm-hmm. And looking back 2 years ago, sitting in an information session, a front door session, getting the information, it was when there was a change from MSCs to care coordination. It was that messy situation happening in 2018, which no one really knew how to navigate. They had all these agencies helping families, and then they were going down to 3 in New York City. And so good luck with trying to get anything done that summer. And I just had this feeling that I wasn't going to let that stop me. And I learned everything I could. I did my own paperwork. I did my own Medicaid application. And anything that could go wrong with my stuff went wrong. I couldn't even find someone to submit the Medicaid application for me at the time. I didn't realize the process. But short of going down to Medicaid and submitting it, I had done everything else. So in the end, I finally was connected with an agency that actually took my call, didn't tell me I had to wait 4 months to get a call back. And then my issue was I couldn't get a care manager in that agency. And so I was that lunatic with 100 emails, seeing 100 people on them. Like, I need help. Everything is done. I have approval. I have my Medicaid. I just now need a care manager to finish the waiver part. And, how they didn't have me, locked up, I'm not sure. But they finally got me a care manager. And jokingly, one of the supervisors at the time, one of the regional directors says, would you like a job? Because here I had all this stack of paperwork walking into them. And I said, no, I just need a care manager. And it was in jest. Well, as the months passed and as I was helping more families and the support groups, and I started my own support group to help parents navigate through this paperwork, my husband said to me one day, he goes, what are you doing? You're up till 2 a.m. You're on these private messages on Facebook, helping families from all over. And then I went on SLMS, which is the statewide learning management system. And I took all the classes to learn about everything, from direct service providing to self-direction, everything. And I went to this agency that had my son, Tri-County Care, and I said, I would like to come work for you. I would like to come and help families. And they said, what? I said, here, this is what I've done, because it was like, well, you have no experience with people with developmental disabilities. And I just said, well, my son, this is how it's kind of seen on paper. And I said, well, right. I've done all of this, and my master's degree is in education and in English. And I said, I can navigate, through this with families. And I went right to the top, and she said, yeah, let's do this. So anyways, that's where I started my journey, and I started getting out there and helping families. So it's not just that I'm sitting here doing paperwork with them, because a lot of families don't know what to do when they get that diagnosis. And so what happens is, or sometimes they don't know that they have a diagnosis. They see things are happening. The schools, while they do evaluations and help you with the IEP piece of it, they don't necessarily diagnose. So the first thing I would say, if you see some of the red flags or you see things just are not right, go with your gut and go to a developmental pediatrician. Even if it's the smallest thing that you see, write it down. And so when you go, you have these notes. That being said, once someone has the diagnosis, even prior to that, you can take a front door class with OPWDD, the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. And you take that class. It's very easy to do right now because they're online. And they'll go through and give you all the information as to what services are involved and what the process is. But basically, you don't need to have you don't need to have the diagnosis to start the process. So what you can do is get evaluations. If you're not sure, if you can use the ones from the school, but sometimes they don't have everything necessary. I would say is to speak to an intake specialist. You can call OPW, the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, the front door, and they will guide you and they will tell you what you need. So basically you need a psychological with an IQ and an adaptive or a Vineland. And the Vineland talks about their daily living skills. So the IQ is the basic IQ, and a lot of schools do that for you already, but they might not do the adaptive. So you just might need that piece. You need a social history or a psychosocial, which is not even an evaluation. It's just what's happened in their life since they've been born. Very simple. I had no idea what that was. Then you just need a medical, a basic medical. It's your physical that you get done every year with the diagnosis on it. So it has your vitals, the same thing you will probably already have for your school. So you already have it because you have to turn it in every year. So it's that simple. And I know families, when they hear, oh, I have to get all this paperwork. No, it's those three things. Once you have those documents, you can submit them yourself to OPWDD, or you can, attach yourself with someone, an intake specialist like myself. All three agencies have one. And I personally, I can speak for myself. I take the person from the front door, even before the front door, all the way through. So then what happens once I submit your paperwork, we go for a determination of eligibility. Now, the determination of eligibility just says that you are able to go for waiver services. It's something that comes down from the Department of Health, mental hygiene. Doesn't necessarily mean you're entitled to waiver services. That's a separate piece. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. They just think one automatically goes with the other. Right. But you can have eligibility, and some people don't do anything with it. They don't necessarily go and get waiver services. They might use it for other reasons. That being said, once you have that eligibility, you need Medicaid, because Medicaid is what pays for these services, and that you cannot do on your own. That is something you'd have to then, once you have an eligibility, you would be sent to one of the three CCOs, so Care Design, ACA, or Tri-County. And OPWDD gives you that list. We help you fill out the application. For me, I sit down with the family, I do it for them, and so it's very easy. It's not overwhelming as it was 2 years ago. And we submit that. Now, if a family already has Medicaid, you've just gotten 2 months back of your life, because you don't have to apply for it. We can have that converted. Something I want families to know is that if you have a Child Health Plus waiver, any type of Obamacare, it does have to be converted. You can't have both. It's something you have to pick and choose. If you do not have the Medicaid, we apply. Now, under regular circumstances, it takes about 4 weeks. I've had them be approved in 2 weeks. Now we're at about 10 to 12 weeks because of COVID. Once you have the approval, we have Medicaid, the CCO enrolls you, the care coordination organization. They enroll you. And it's the first of the next month, something I also didn't know. So let's say you get your approval on July 2nd, you will not be approved to enroll till August 1st. Okay. Then OPWDD on August 1st gives us a list of everyone who got approved because it's been submitted in their portal. And then you now are with the care management agency organization, and you are assigned a care manager. Now, that care manager then completes part 3, which is the waiver packet. Okay, so the waiver packet, that's your final step. That's where the care manager will call you, make an appointment to come see you in person. Right now, they're doing it virtually, so they don't even have to come to the home. But normally they would come to the home, and they will do an IM assessment, it's called, the DDP2s, and your life plan. And basically, the IM assessment helps to generate the life plan, which is basically the Bible for the individual. So how I explain that to people is, if, God forbid, something happened to me or my husband, someone could pick up his life plan and know exactly what's going on,
Right.
know exactly what medicines he needs, know exactly what his habits are, what his weaknesses are, his strengths, what his needs are, what we're working on. And that's why it's important to not leave anything out of that life plan. That's what everything is based on. So once you have all that put together, your care manager submits it for approval, submits it back to OPWDD. And right now, for that waiver packet to be approved, it initially was taking quite a bit of time. I don't want anyone to go by what I'm saying, because every situation is different. But let's just figure right now 4 to 6 weeks. Let's just say. But there's really no, it wouldn't be fair for me to say exactly how much. It could be sooner, it could be a little longer.
Yeah.
But in that packet, it's going, if a family plans on doing self-direction, that's a waiver service. If the family wants ComHab, community habilitation, where someone comes to the home or takes the individual out into community to work on goals that are in the life plan, they have to be in the life plan. And then there's respite, which is basically babysitting. That has to be requested at that time. Now, if you don't request it, that's fine. It can be go back and an amendment can be made. But again, it's going to take a little longer. So it's nice for a family. What I do with my family is I send them a brochure out right when I do their intake. So it gives them all a list of the waiver services or services that are available, and it breaks it down.
Nice.
There's no, something I want to double back to with evaluations. When you, right now, it's basically like this. The social history and the violent can be done over the phone, but it has to be in person for the psychological part of the IQ. That's not negotiable. OPWDD is not negotiating that piece. Now, if someone is older, let's say someone is above the age of 15, 16, 17, 18, we can have an evaluation that's up to 3 years old. It depends on the individual and where they are in their abilities at that time. I would say anyone under 13, 14, it has to be less than a year old. So it's not negotiable. Even if it goes over the year, a few days, they will not take it. Everything has to be there. It's very strict. And again, it's so there can be a big drastic change in an individual's functions in a year. So if you had something done at age 4, now at age 5, we're going to have you, you're going to submit your packet for eligibility. There could have been a drastic change, positive or negative.
Right.
So OPWDD wants to make sure that they have the right representation in front of them of of the individual, where the cognitive deficits are. For eligibility, you have to have over 32% deficit in one of the areas, IQ or adaptives. Usually children or individuals with an ASD diagnosis with autism, their IQ is pretty high. So where they would have the deficit would be in their daily living skills. So they can't really do things for themselves. That's where the need is.
Gotcha.
So that's where the supports and services would help. And then that's it. Once you have your services, you have to, choose whether you want to go with a DSP, a direct service provider, or you could do your own self-direction, which a lot of people, I'd say 90% of my people do that, that I deal with on Staten Island, where you could self-hire your staff, but you can also do both. So that's another misconception. People think that, I can only do, nope, you can do both. You can go with agency. You don't have to stick with just hiring your own. It's very hard sometimes. And this brings me back to agencies and services and how do you know which ones to pick? And it's overwhelming. I always say word of mouth. And I know for us, for me, if I have a 6-year-old child, maybe someone who has help that's 21 is going to have a different need, obviously. So if I'm a parent and I'm looking for a respite worker or actually a ComHab worker for my son to help him with his daily needs, at 6, it's a little different. They're changing a pull-up. They're teaching him how to, do that himself. They're helping him with using utensils, safety out in the streets. If I had an older child, I would probably want them to be more of a mentor, someone to really go out with them in the community and to just maybe be like a friend, more than anything. And you can probably speak to that, Kevin, a little bit more on the DSP side, but I think that that's important. So it's a different way that we would approach that type of service, I think. So that's.
Wow. I mean, I definitely think that even coming from being in the field for 10-ish years, it is still very complicated, I guess you could say, from an outsider perspective. But the way that you break it down, I think, was great, because it kind of seems like it's not so much complicated, so much as it's just
waiting game.
Yeah, a time-consuming process, really.
My quote to families is that, hurry up, let's do this. And they'll tell you, hurry up, let's do this, because we don't want to wait on them. We're going to wait on them. We don't want them to wait on us. I think a big problem that's happening right now, I should say, and this is something I really wanted to clarify, is that things are moving and everything is working. OPWDD is up and functional and running. And I do think that the state agencies had a big problem when this all hit. They weren't prepared to work from home. Right. My agency, we had no problem. I was already working. Well, we're all set up, and right away they prepared, and everyone had everything brought home. They could bring their phones home. So we were set up in that way. It's a little harder for these state agencies. So that's where it was almost like weeks of nothing, a couple of weeks where nothing was happening. Yes, and Staten Island supervisors were working and they were doing the best that they could, but no one was going in the building. And so no one could retrieve anything, and they weren't set up at home to do that. I mean, that was a big thing. However, I must tell you, kudos to Staten Island Office of Developmental Disabilities. They really are on point. Out of all of the DDROs, I would say they are the smoothest, the best. I'm telling you right now. And I'm not, maybe I'm a little biased, but I think they are awesome here. They're so supportive. They respond right away. And families tell me the same thing. So they are all up and functional. So nobody should be sitting there going, oh, I'm going to wait till COVID's over. I'm going to wait. And you don't have to wait. You get in now, because you will be waiting later. And the other issue I just wanted to clear up with Medicaid is there's a lot going on now in the forums with what's going on. And yes, they were just stopped at one point, nothing happening for weeks. So OPWDD was doing their piece. People don't realize that the applications for the younger children under 18 are processed differently than someone over 18. So 18 just goes directly to Medicaid because they're adults. Under 18 goes to OPWDD first in Manhattan. They're amazing. They did their part, and then they were just waiting for Medicaid. Waiting. So who's going to come pick up the stack of applications for everyone? You're talking everyone. And so you're talking weeks. It's now moving. So now we're getting approvals for March and April. But there was a scary time where you have to sit there and basically tell families there's no one in the they're just not doing it. There's nothing we can do. So it's working now. Everything is moving. So I really encourage families to get out there. And another big thing people ask me about, who's doing evaluations. This is something I get every day. People DM me. July 1st is when the budget resets. Now we're talking if you don't have Medicaid. If you don't have Medicaid, there is family supportive fundings that will pay for those for OPWDD. Now, July 1st is when their budget resets. So really no one was doing them on Staten Island. Eden 2 ran out in January. So there's been 6 months where it's really been on Pouch, Staten Island Mental Health. And they're amazing too. But it's been all on them. So what's happening now, we're waiting for July 1st. I would say to families, wait another week. Let's see what happens. Let's see what resets. And then you'll have more options, because then people will be able to go that route. But talking about that, there are some budget cuts possibly coming. So we want to make sure that everyone, yes, it's big. And before, funding used to come 90% from the federal government and 10% from the state. Now it's 50-50 starting July 1st. That's scary because we all know, we hear every day from the governor that New York State has no money. So if they're supposed to shell out for these services and there's no money, what are we doing? Right. But these are important. This is not a luxury. These services are not a luxury. These are not something we can cut. This is something that needs to be there. This is what helps to enrich people's lives. This is what helps them to grow. This is what helps them to excel. Forget about the fact that there's a ton of regression that's just happened in these past 3 months. So a lot of things that have escalated in a positive manner have just been wiped out. Just take that escalator and just make it flat, because that's just what's happened with a lot of families. I know myself. So I would say this is not an area that we should be cutting. Direct service providers, we should not be cutting. Care management, this is the lifeline for people. Some people don't have parents or families that can take care of them. You know, a care manager does a lot more than that. A care manager helps them with every piece, whether it be renewing their Medicaid, SNAP benefits, resources for children. They can sit in on your IEP meeting and support you. Families don't even know that. That's huge. How scary is it to walk in to face the Board of Ed who wants to start cutting your services and you feel all alone? Well, you know what? Your care manager can be there with you. That's what they're for. They're a representative for the individual. So that's not somewhere where we should be cutting. ComHab, respite. I just feel there has to be another way. So please, please, please. I mean, I've been sharing it all over Facebook. I know a lot of the agencies have been sharing it. Please let Governor Cuomo know this is not somewhere we can afford to cut anything.
Yeah, you can definitely see on our social media that we've been pushing a lot of content revolving around the budget cuts and things like that. And it's a constant struggle. Every time that we have a success, there's always another year where they're trying to shave it off of something else, you know, and you get 6 inches one way, but then 6 inches the other way. It's never a completed task, you know? So I definitely understand the constant vigilance, trying to keep that budget where it should be.
Absolutely.
So Christina, you had mentioned earlier that the families that you've been seeing, you have about 90% of families that go through self-direction.
Yes.
One of the questions that we had received was asking if we can highlight some of the benefits of self-direction.
Oh, absolutely.
Through those supports.
So let me break it down this way, that people think that self-direction, it's a waiver service. So like ComHab is, respite, self-direction. That has nothing to do with education, and it has nothing to do with medical. So that's the first thing I want to make very clear, because I get this a lot. Like, oh, I have self-direction now, I'm going to go get, you know, therapies. And no, that's not what self-direction is. So, and that's not what I'm going to get this budget and I'm going to be.
Uh-oh. I think we lost Christina.
Family has a primary insurance, and then they have a secondary insurance, which would be the Medicaid, which is for medical stuff. Then the person, if they get services or anything to do with education, that's done through the Board of Ed. That's how OPWDD sees it, or the state sees it. And then the self-direction, or these services, that's more for the socialization and enriching their daily lives. So they're 3 separate pieces. For me, and for a lot of people, self-direction is great because you have the opportunity to budget appropriately, or how, I would guess, to what the needs of that individual are. So ComHab and respite are important. First of all, respite to give the family a break. And it's great because you can hire, if you're worried about hiring someone you don't know, you have that, you have that piece that it just, your mind is at ease because you know something about these people, even though they're vetted, fingerprinted, background check, the FI does that. But at least you have that comfort that you know the individual a little bit, or that the child, sometimes with children, that they're more comfortable with that person. So that's very important in the day-to-day to help with things. Socialization classes. So, you know, a lot of families struggle to make ends meet every week, and socialization classes are so important. And they really help, these children to thrive, or even individuals. That is very expensive. And so where that comes in, that budget for socialization, yoga classes, swimming classes, exercise classes, camp, summer camp, so important in the summer to keep people doing something. After school programs that have, art, music, coding, that all is great. But if you sit there and you tally this all up, very expensive. So a lot of families don't do this at all. And what's great about self-direction, as long as it's a community class, let's say they don't even take a direct payment from self-direction, a memorandum of understanding, the MOU, that you can pay for it out of pocket and get reimbursed. Another great piece of self-direction is you get money for family reimbursed respite. And what that is that if you don't want to have to go through the process of hiring staff and fingerprinting and all that stuff, you can go ahead and just pay out of pocket and you'll get reimbursed for that. So quick babysitting, grandma wants to come over and, or a neighbor, whatever it is, and you don't have to go through that whole process. Also money for travel. So if the point of it was to get people out into the community. So as an incentive, you'll get mileage for taking the individual places. So if they're in the car and they're driving down to the Jersey Shore to enjoy the day, you're going to get mileage. And that helps to offset some of the costs of, the wear and tear on the car. So
do you find that a lot of people aren't aware of all the things that self-direction kind of covers? I feel like there's a really big umbrella that you might not even think about all the things that it could actually cover. That's
why I became a broker. And that's why I took the self-direction classes. You can, even if you don't want to do your own brokering, you can, on the OPWDD website or the statewide learning management system, SLMS, you can go and take these classes. It doesn't cost you anything. They're up there at any time. I would take them 1, 2, 3 in the morning, sit down, headphones on, and just watch them. They're very informative. And you don't have to do anything with it, but it's just a plethora of knowledge on there that people don't even know is available to them at their fingertips. Yeah, absolutely.
So Christina, I have some questions for you. Okay. So to kind of go back on some of this, like the beginning of our conversation, kind of like the first steps and where to go from here. Can you explain the Medicaid waiver and how it pays for a person's services?
Well, Medicaid is, they're the ones who pay out the providers. So there's different ways to bill. So I'm sure care coordination bills a certain way. A direct service provider would bill a certain way. An FI, the fiscal intermediary who pays for the self-direction, pays out a certain way. The details on the back end, I'm not really familiar with, but they have to, they're on the hook for whatever is happening. So for instance, if an individual, and we get this this is what's happening right now, actually. So with COVID, there was no one in the office to receive the Medicaid renewals. There was no one there opening the mail. So what Medicaid decided to do is they first started with, okay, for March and April, we'll automatically renew anybody who had Medicaid, so you don't have to worry about it for a whole year. Right now, we're up till August. So anyone who had a renewal from March until August will automatically be renewed, whether or not you send that renewal in. But I do highly recommend just sending in the renewal. It will sit there in their pile, but it's there. So you're automatically going to be renewed. In May, there was a glitch, and Medicaid sent out these letters to all CCOs, to all families. It wasn't any specific care management organization. And they said, hey, your Medicaid's going to drop. You didn't send in your renewal. It's going to end on June 1st, that caused a frenzy. So right away, we meet every week, entitlements meets, everyone meets, and they did turn around and we let them know what the issue was. All the agencies, all the care management agencies let Medicaid know. And they did say that it was a glitch. They were working on it, but that if anything dropped, they would automatically back pay anything that had dropped. So not to worry, but that doesn't mean anything because of course we're going to worry because then who's on the hook for that money, right? So with that, that's what's been happening now. But in general, sometimes things do happen. Let's say it was last year and you didn't send in your renewal and you don't have that coverage. Who's on the hook? This is what you get a lot of times.
Mhm.
So every month you should be, the care management or your providers, they're sending in a bill. They're billing for the services. Now, you can usually work these things out. So Medicaid would just never say would go a long amount of time. It should never go a long amount of time where you don't have coverage. But if, God forbid something dropped, there is that responsibility piece. If you not knowingly are attending a class or something and you didn't know you didn't have the active Medicaid, well, it's up to the agencies to really go and fight for that or to go and see what happened. I have this where I got a letter from an agency, or the parent did, that they haven't been able to bill. Well, it wasn't an issue because everyone else was billing and Medicaid was paying everyone else. So it was a way that they were billing out. That's really an issue. But I haven't seen too many problems like that, unless it was something that a renewal wasn't received. And that can easily be checked. So if you have a renewal as a parent or as an individual, every year you're going to get a form, you send it in. It's always a couple months, but you can check to make sure that they received it. Your care manager can check. So I would always say, always check to make sure that it was reactivated for another year. That way, there will not be any lapse in services. But as far as who's on the hook, it's going to be the agency or the provider who's billing.
Okay. Makes sense.
So checking my trusty list of questions that I had prepared for you today, Christina. So can you, Christina, give us some important tips to parents for young children who are in the process of learning that they may have a disability from the parent side? Do you have some tips for us?
Yeah, don't be in denial. That's the first thing. A family will speak to me, and I've had this actually with very close friends, and I'm very vocal about it, but maybe in the beginning I wasn't so vocal about it. But when my son was 1, we made a decision that this is something we were going to grab with both hands and accept it. The biggest thing I see is that people don't want to believe what's happening, or they think it's just going to get better. Or someone says, oh yeah, my son didn't talk till he was like 4 and he's fine. Or it's always this. Everyone has something to say, and that's great and that's fine and it's very encouraging. But at the end of the day, you have to go with your gut. And you have to speak. If you see something, start noting it. And I remember I said something. I said, he makes this thing when he's 9 months old, and his nanny said, well, my daughter did that, but she's a lawyer now. So
right.
And I just think, but I knew something was, and he'll still do that excitement. That's an autism tick. And at the time I didn't know, but I remember that always. And so I'm the one who would push, and I would say, hey, to my doctor, we need to start EI and do all these things. And they were great. But there are some families that just let things go, and they know something is up, but they just don't, or one of the parents doesn't want to accept it. And so it's harder for the other parent to move forward with services. I see that also, but I would say, don't wait. It is just proven. The earlier that you start with any type of services, the better it will be, because you can see such change. I know for my son, I know for other individuals, even a year of services makes such an impact on their lives. There's nothing to be ashamed about. And that's a big problem. I think right now, and I can only speak to Staten Island, that I would say there was a stigma with OPWDD waiver and services and Medicaid. Oh, Medicaid pays for it. I don't want that. They don't understand really what it is. You can't feel like that, because it's not a handout. These are services that the child or the individual needs to function and to better. How do I say this without it sounding, it's going to help them to develop better and to become happy and to become more independent. And if you're just sitting there thinking this is just going to go away, it's not. So you really have to attack it early on and full force, 100%. And my developmental pediatrician, who's one of the first ever in New York State, She's been doing it 44 years, and she said to me that has been the biggest challenge. So the school can tell you one thing, and they can just present something, and parents just take it, and it's like, okay, this is, but they never do their part, whether it be with a developmental pediatrician or kind of extending those services outside of school. So I would really say, if you feel something and you sense something, and you shouldn't be comparing children. That's not what I'm trying to say. Everyone has their own curve. However, you do see things, and I would just say, don't be embarrassed. Just do it. Just help. There's so much help.
Oh yeah.
I think that I think the common theme is this sense of like being overwhelmed as a parent when it does happen, not only with the process itself, but just being overwhelmed with like this idea of what having a child with a disability means. You're right that we're kind of only now transitioning to where it's becoming more inclusive, more understanding that this is just they just need different supports and they just need different things. But even 10 years ago, even less, 5 years ago, you definitely still see a lot of people who have this idea of like, oh no, my child, and now what does that mean for them? And in reality, it means that they could have the same life as anybody else as long as they just have the right supports. You just have to put in a little extra legwork to do your due diligence. And it sounds like the care manager that they end up working with is pretty much hand in hand with them in getting them whatever it is that they need. So that's kind of like, I would assume, one of their main point people that they would speak to.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I want to make it very clear, and this is something I say all the time. All pieces of your puzzle, so there's something called the COS, which is your circle of support. And your circle of support is, of course, the parents or the family, the guardian, the adoptive parent, whatever it is, the care manager. If you have self-direction services, it's going to be your fiscal intermediary, your FI, your support broker, and then any ComHab respite workers. They can, any support that you want as part of your circle of support. I want to just say that care management, fiscal intermediary, and your broker are three separate pieces. While you can, in fact, have in-house brokerage and things like that, they can be three separate pieces that are interchangeable at any time. Not everybody is the right fit for everybody all the time. So I would say, if you are not comfortable with a care manager, that's big. You need to make sure that you make that change. Once assigned a care manager, you should always know who the supervisor is, the regional director. If you don't know today, I know I can ask friends and they're like, no, I don't know. Ask. Have that. That should be right there on your list. Your FI, your fiscal intermediary, same thing. If you're not feeling that support and they're not doing what they need to do, we have something called self-direction liaisons at the Staten Island DDRO. Margaret, Helene, and Shreem. You can call them and they can assist in any of that also. There's another support that parents don't even know that they have. I'll say, hey, call your self-direction liaison. We have, if you're not happy with your broker, you can terminate that at any time and you can switch. And people always think that they have to be, oh, my broker is helping me with this, or everything is interchangeable. If you're not comfortable, it's time to stop that relationship and move on. And this is something that comes up a lot, which makes me very sad. It's good to have so many different people involved, and it makes people accountable. And so I don't know how many times I'll be on the phone with someone I'm supporting, let's say through Facebook, and they're just in tears because they had this experience, and I'm just like, well, then change it. Let's change it, fix it. Like, I can do that? Of course. You run that train. They work for you, right? So let's talk about me at Tri-County Care. I work for you. What do you need? That's what I'm going to do. Someone who works for my son, they got to do what he needs, right? So I just want to make that very clear. No one is ever stuck with anything.
I do think that in general, just off the cuff, I think that in general, when it comes to like our physical selves, like we go to the doctor, we go to the dentist, when you don't have a good dentist, maybe they just poke around too much and you just all bad afterwards, you go to a different dentist. It's never like, oh, well, I have to go to a dentist. As my dentist, I'm obliged to them, you know? But I think a lot of times when it comes to like the mental health, developmental disability field in general, we kind of feel like we get into a certain routine with someone. We get a care manager, we get a program that they have services with, and it's always just, oh, well, I'm stuck with them. It is what, even when you think about just like personal therapy, people will go to a therapist and they'll go one time and then they'll just say, you know what, forget it. I can't do it. It's not right. And sometimes you have to have multiple. Hey.
We have a special guest.
You know, you have to have a.
Sorry.
No, we love them more than that.
Mom have worker called out today.
That was me 2 weeks ago. My daughter came by and just poked her head around too. So believe me, I know.
Oliver, say hi.
I'm sorry, but yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you got to go. Go ahead. Go upstairs. Sorry.
No problem. No problem. But yeah, I just think that, you know, that's a good point to make. Definitely.
Yes, it's important to know.
The paper crunch, Mama.
All right. Go ahead. Go.
Can I make another one?
Yes, go ahead.
In the printer?
Absolutely.
Do you have more paper?
Yes, there's paper now.
Mom, can I print some more things? Yes. You say yes or
yes,
no?
Yes. Okay.
Oh.
I do want to note that Oliver
Your
had
life.
a stepping up ceremony today, so
He
congratulations.
did.
Congratulations. All right.
Thank you, he did. Yes, we're going now to first grade.
Aw.
Wow.
Amazing. Yeah, it's amazing.
Time flies.
Yes. Yes.
So, Kevin, you were talking about on the mental health side and developmental disability.
No, I just think that it's really important that we, like she was saying, just understand that whatever people are, whoever's in this process with you is, like you were saying, working for you. And if it doesn't work out the same way that you wouldn't go to the same store that doesn't have your stuff or the same dentist that mangles your gums, you don't have to go to the same broker or the same whichever.
Yeah, and whatever it is, and that's anything. That's you wouldn't tolerate that if you went to a doctor's office or you went to a dance class and someone was rude to you or someone didn't, you didn't get anything out of it. You wouldn't continue, right? Yep. You would just say, "Hey, it's not for me. It's not going to work." Or you had a relationship and it wasn't working. You just, it's the same thing. It's so important to have that support there and for it to be 100%. From everyone involved.
Absolutely. I think that for a parent, you'll feel that kind of like confidence more so that you have a team that's able to help you with all of this overwhelming steps and time consuming process that you have. If you have somebody that could easily explain it to you, that's there when you need them, it makes the process that much easier.
Yeah, it's something that I feel some families are so grateful that they're just so happy to get these services because they've been without them so long, or it's a single parent and it's just them and they just have no support at all, that they're just happy to have it, so they'll settle. That should never be the case. That should never be the case. It should always be the best team around you. And I call it a team because everyone has to work together, no matter what the agency is, no matter who the provider is out. Again, you can have different providers who provide different services. Everyone should be working and communicating together for the individual.
Yeah.
So Christina, actually, now that you mentioned that about having multiple providers, do you notice that people have more or less success when using multiple providers for different services?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the individual. Some people like the one-stop shop. So they like to have their broker, their FI. Maybe, some agencies I know, have everything in one stop, and they're happy with that because they don't want to deal with having to deal with so many different facets of it. Mm-hmm. So I think on the other hand, sometimes people like to have it in different places so that, again, there is that different type of accountability or a different idea, maybe. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It varies. It's not the same for any one individual. But I do find that sometimes having it in one place, it makes it easier for families. However, if someone has a friend who's a broker, they want to use that broker. They want to use that broker, or they want to use this FI because they've heard great things from their friend about this FI, or there's a specific worker that they want and that worker is employed with, PCC. So let's go to that. It really is going to vary on the family. If you really are just starting out and you don't have an idea, ask your care manager. I know for us at Tri-County, we have a resource portal, and we invite all agencies and all providers to be part of that. And it just, so if a family says, hey, I need a ComHab workers, we look and we see who's providing the ComHab services, and we're able to give that to the families and give them options.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
That's awesome. So you mentioned that your ComHab worker called out today. Have you noticed that the services provided have changed in the midst of COVID? And do you see where we could be going from here?
Well, I'll just make it clear. In my case, she just had something came up for her with a family thing, so that was a little different. Wasn't she just? But I think that yeah, I don't want to put her blow up her spot, but
never that.
No, but in the case, I think in the beginning, March, April, you couldn't get people in the homes, so there was a desperate need for staff because children were home all day and parents had to work or had to work from home, or parents have more than one child and they couldn't juggle everything, and rightfully so. You know, during the day, if you have a younger child, let's say with a special needs, the other two are in school. Let's say the two older children in school, so it's not so stressful. Well, right now, if it's just you and those three children, you can't provide everyone with the equal amount of support that they need, right? With the schooling from home. So it was a real big struggle for families. March, April, May. I think things have softened up a little bit with the providers, but still people are scared. The virus is not gone, right? So there's still families that don't want people from outside coming home because they don't let anyone in. They're still quarantined for whatever reason. Not even family members, immediate family comes in. So I think in that way, they're a little scared to have outsiders come in, and not because there's something wrong with that person, just because they're out interacting with other people. You know, a ComHab worker might have more than one individual.
True.
So that is the situation where I think there was a problem. I know right now there is just, with summer coming, there is a real need for staff. And I know families are having a really hard time finding staff. I mean, I don't know, agencies are telling families that they just don't have staff. They just don't have the people. They don't have the bodies.
Yeah.
So this is something that we're hearing. And I don't know if it's because people just don't want to do it because they don't want to be around other people right now, or if it's just there's so much of a need that everyone is spread very thin.
Right.
So with that said, do you see any silver linings in the way that services are going to be provided, like post-COVID?
I think that, well, it's hard. I think it depends on the individual. I think that with the way that we're doing, like the services, let's say the determinations and all of this, things are moving in a better direction with now people can do things more efficiently in a different way. So, however, I think with staffing and things like that, I don't know that these regressions that we've had, I don't know how that's going to impact what's going to happen in September. Let's say now I'm just speaking about individuals under 18, let's just say. I feel like there's going to be a lot of support needed through the summer and come the fall. So that worries me a little bit. The silver lining, again, of course, is people have learned a different way to do things.
Right.
That's great. So we are kind of coming towards the end, but besides being a part of Tri-County, you are also part of the Staten Island Developmental Disabilities Council's outreach committee.
Yes.
With us.
With you guys. Yes. This is something I did want to touch upon. It's so important. People don't even know what this is, what the Staten Island Disabilities Council is, the SIDDC. They have so many different supports there. Again, the one-stop shop for supports. That's what I call it. So when I speak to families about it, or I'm out doing my outreach and I mention this to them, they don't realize there's adult advocacy, there is education. So a lot of times parents will call me with issues with the Board of Ed or they have questions, I send them to Mary Alice, who's on the education committee. There's a self-direction committee. There is a family support services committee. So a family that maybe got determination, they're eligible for services right off the bat, not even having to be enrolled in care management or have waiver. Because you have eligibility, you can receive family supported services. They don't even know that. That's really important. Housing, adult housing, so many, I mean, help me out here, guys. You guys, I'm drawing a blank, but there are so many supports. And if you have any questions, you can just email their main mailbox and they will direct you. They will say, hey, this is where you should, who you should speak to, or this is, you can go here and they'll help you with this. So a family that is struggling and they really don't know, they have some type of pressing issue, they can call or email SIDDC and they will direct them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great resource. The SIDDC is such a great resource. And there are so many committees that are available to join, outreach being one of them. What had gotten you involved in the outreach committee specifically? I know your role in general is an outreach role. Why did that one kind of come near and dear to your heart?
I actually, I become a parent-to-parent support parent. And in speaking to Mary Alice and Julia, who run that, I was trying to figure out a way to reach families to not only support them in what they're doing, but to let them know that there are these supports for them and that they're not alone, because it's very lonely. It's very lonely when you have a situation that you really, it's very new to you. You don't know how to navigate through the processes. And I don't ever want anyone to feel that they're alone, you know, because we all have that 10-minute cry in the shower where you can be the strongest person, but the slightest thing might overwhelm you. And so you're good with out there and helping everyone else, but sometimes you just need some support. So for me, I was really looking for something extra, and that's how I found SIDDC. But also, I wanted to share what I've learned and let people know that there are these services and there are these supports, more so supports, cannot stress that enough. And that's why I felt like being a part of the outreach for SIDDC, it was important. I really try to put myself out there, kind of just tell it like it is, and it's very straightforward, the good, the bad, and the ugly. However, I just want to make sure that people know that there are these supports there, and no one it can be anonymous. This is another thing. People like, I don't want people in my business. This is something I hear a lot. But if you go to siddc.org, you can, I mean, you'll see just, again, a plethora of resources. Read what it is, read what it's about, and to see what is there for you. And if not for you, maybe someone you know.
Absolutely. So with that said, Christina, what's your next step? Where's the life of Christina taking us?
I'll be running for governor.
You got my vote.
No. The next step is just to try to keep reaching as many people as possible and trying to get the supports and services for our children and adults. You know, this is something I do want to mention too. You know, there are people who are 67 years old who are now only going for a determination of disability because their families had always handled everything. And so a parent who's maybe 90 might have a 7-year-old child, and now they might be worried. I say child, I mean their child might be worried that if something happens to them, what's going to happen now? So I would say that it's very important that parents don't wait. When the child is 16, 17, there's that transitional period you should start thinking about when they're leaving school and going on to the next step. And that's a whole other story for another day. But I would say, don't wait. I personally will continue fighting for my son and fighting for these services and fighting for the rights of our individuals who can't speak for themselves or who can't do for themselves. It's very important as a community, and I say that community, and people are forgetting that these days. It's a community, and we all have to work together. There's no one against anyone else. There's no agency against. Everyone is really working together. It's actually very cohesive, despite what people think. And I really just want to get the message out there.
And we love that about you, Christina. So we want to thank you so much for coming by, and you're always welcome to come back and talk about everything and anything that you can think of. So we want to thank you again, and we want you to stay safe and well.
Thank you. You too.
And, for more information, you guys can reach out if you want to get in touch with Christina. Do we have a contact for you that if anyone has any questions?
Yes.
Brain.
Yes. You gonna type it?
I will.
908-907-0971.
Awesome. So this is Christina's phone number.
Text me, message me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And with that said, we also want to mention that we will be having a Self-Direction 101 workshop next Monday and Tuesday, Monday at 10 a.m. and Tuesday at 5 p.m. So that is on Monday, June 29th. You can take a look at our social media at PCCSNY for more information. And we want to thank you all again for joining us on your lunch break, and we will see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.